Factorio is about Factorio is about liberation. The liberation of our people, the liberation of the oppressed, and spreading the global revolution to space. Because today, with the backing of the working class, we'll be launching our very own Sputnik. Utilizing the power of communism, what could possibly go wrong? Now, relative to my other Factorio video, we'd started a new game to add some mods. But now that I'd more than quadrupled my hours in Factorio, we sped through the early game pretty fast. Drills got made, smelting was automated, and the lakes polluted. I organized our first level sciences, then made a beeline for blue science. Our starting map was looking pretty good, but less good when we realized there were several different viter nests right on our doorstep, none of which were receptive to our diplomacy. Wiping them out would have been easy had I not installed a mod that prevented us from placing turrets near them. To whomever gave that mod creator a keyboard, mouse, and rights, kindly go to jail. Either way, we continued to make our collectivist utopia #1 at everything, like production, research, and apparently pollution. I mean, what could be more communist than painting the whole map red? On the bright side though, we landed right next to huge oil deposits. It didn't take long to get oil refining and blue science research, so we went about sharing the resources right away. Back to the hives, we'd researched cars and zoomed on over to take them out. We died several times, but with the power of expendability, we eventually cleared the local insects out. We also started work on the first Great Wall, aptly named North Korea. In terms of production, we weren't doing very well because I was waiting on the electric furnaces. So I manually crafted all my blue science packs because I have chronic no brain. 250 wasted moments I will never get back later, we went ahead and built our first set of electric furnaces. With them, I semi-automated blue science and advanced our oil tech. Because oil processing takes a lot of time and effort to fully flesh out, I sat down and really thought about it. Then made this pipe spaghetti and walked away. So at this point, the local non-believers were getting annoying. Help, help. They kept getting into random parts of the base, which sometimes made no sense whatsoever. You stupid. How did you even get over there? I drove up to the nearest insect hive and gunned it down, but it didn't really make a difference. Our pollution was so bad that half the insects who attacked us weren't even on the visible map. For our northern front, I painstakingly built a second Great Wall to keep the invaders out. Around us was quite a bit of water, so we could use the sea as a natural choke point. But on the right side, it was completely open, so making a giant wall wasn't really an option. That's when I remembered we were using the water fill mod, which allows you to craft water tiles to create artificial lakes, or in our case, oceans. After getting a few thousand tiles crafted, I made one giant moat around the eastern front, which would block off all insect attacks from there. But this just diverted biters to our other fronts. So I sealed off the southern side too, not really realizing how strong water fill was. With everything but our walls sealed, we were pretty much safe for the time being. I drove over to give munitions to North Korea and paved the way for the next step of our game, drones. Drones are one of Factorio's strongest tools. They automatically construct, move, and filter items for you. So I spent an hour figuring out what that was, then giving up by half-assing it just enough to work. I was preparing our factory for yellow and purple sciences, which are two of the worst. Yellow is time-consuming, and purple requires railroads and electric furnaces in a bottle. How exactly that makes sense, I do not know. I also finished off blue science, so we were well on our way to automating every color. But while we were doing that, the walls weren't looking so great. I drove over to repair the turrets, but we needed a better solution. To start building drones, I had to dip my balls into sulfuric acid production, then play more Factorio. We built motors using mass-produced lube and combined all of it to make our drone material. Back at the wall, I threw down a drone hub and some construction bots which would automatically repair and replace destroyed structures. I also spent the next few hours revamping our production to be able to use drones. These red chests allow drones to take items from them, so I turned most of our storage into them. The drones allowed us to start working towards more advanced research, like power armor. This would let us do funny things like insert a nuclear reactor into our armor, because nothing says I love communism like a cancerous tumor. And to end our perfect day of progress, I made our oil refineries look a lot more like hell. This transitioned us into phase 2 of expansion, our mobilization. The daily progress that we were making kept getting stifled by insect attacks against our walls. Even with drones, things were still pretty bad. So I made the executive decision to seal off the leftmost wall to prevent the attacks. I thought the north would be okay, but apparently the insects were walking all the ways around the island to get there, so I had to seal that off too. The issue with this is that it would lead to insects massing outside, so it'd be harder to expand later. And boy, were there a lot of them. But it did give me an idea for something to solve the insect problem that we'd get to later. With the factory now an island, we were free to do whatever. First, I automated blue circuit production so we could make yellow science. To speed everything up, I decided it made sense to mass produce concrete to make floors that increase our running speed. That went well. Besides that, our research was coming along. Plus, I researched tanks so we could get some better weaponry. In normal Factorio, only players can drive vehicles, so at most we could use one tank. In modded Factorio, we had a special mod that would allow us to drive many more. Needless to say, I automated tank production too. Going back to our floors, I told the drones to start filling the island with concrete, only to realize I didn't have enough materials, so the base was beginning to look like a crossover between Tetris and schizophrenia. But the walking speed increase was helpful because to get purple signs up, I had to play hopscotch with the tiles to deliver resources manually. With enough purple, we could research a logistics system. This would allow us to use drones for long-distance item transportation instead of needlessly long conveyor belts. Because we'd need thousands of drones for the system to work, I automated logistic and construction drones as well. As logistics systems finished up, I prepared myself to figure out drones for the very first time. Logistics systems gives us 5 chests: red, purple, green, blue, and yellow. Red sends items to the logistics network, while blue requests items from the logistics network. That means we could replace a lot of our longer conveyor belts with drones, but we'd still need the belts we already had, so I upgraded the whole factory into red belts, which would move items even faster. With everything inside the factory beginning to be improved, we needed to start looking outside the factory towards the insects massing at our walls. As it stood, our entire base was sealed in by water, which kept us safe. But inside of our island, we didn't have access to something very special: uranium. The problem with opening up the water field to expand was that insects were everywhere since they were just massing, so we needed a way to grind out the insects for as little a cost as possible. Gun turrets weren't very effective because armored biters took way too many shots to kill. Well, bullets might not be that effective, but we had a weapon far more powerful than that. You see, water filling is pretty strong. You could use it to take out insect hives and block off attackers completely. Because water tiles are completely impassable, a small line of them forces insects to path all the ways through them. So I introduced to you Bloons Tower Defense 7. With one singular flamethrower and a goofy maze, how much damage could it do? A lot. Apparently. For the measly cost of a little fuel, we created an infinite kill box. The flamethrower outranged biters, and we had 40 consecutive walls blocking their path, so nothing was getting through. Now, this was great for defense, but how exactly will we get access to uranium? Insects were pretty close, but we needed an offensive tool. And what better tool was there than a tank? And not just one tank, but a whole mass-produced army of them. I improved our automated production and started to mass-produce ammo too. I also set up a vehicle depot to refuel and rearm all our tanks. All I had to do now was wait for production, so I sat back and looked at the base, which still had the aesthetic of a goth identity crisis. So as to avoid killing my eyes, I spent the next hour improving our mining operations, smelting production, and drone lines. By the time I was done, our tank armada had finally completed. Now, vehicles in Factorio are a little janky. They don't have the best control, and more importantly, they were never designed to be controlled by an AI. That brings us to the mod we have installed, AAI Programmable Vehicles. We could implant AI into any vehicle and control it like an RTS game. Unfortunately, the AI has the intelligence of a drowning victim from The Sims 2. So how exactly would our red army perform then? I drove them to the edge of the biter nest and set them loose. In about 30 seconds, the insect base went from sizable protest to Tiananmen Square in 1989. We wiped out the biters and secured the valuable deposits of uranium. On our way back, we encountered some biters camping our walls, so we peacefully dispersed them. This also showed one of the flaws of using explosives: friendly fire. Pretty much every tank that died did so solely because we shot them in the back with military-grade tank shells. Plus, if you couldn't already tell, they have the intellectual capacity of a lobotomized caterpillar. They literally transcended time and space solely to die. After the tank kerfuffle finished, I went back and sealed up the uranium by expanding the moat. Then I gathered the resources to build a reactor, started mining uranium, and built processors to extract fuel from raw mined ore. With only one reactor, a few heat turbines, and a little fuel, we increased our power production by a huge margin. And in true Soviet fashion, our one poorly maintained nuclear reactor had now turned into 2 poorly maintained nuclear reactors. With our power brought to unsafe levels, now is the perfect time to begin the long haul to the end of the game, launching the rocket. To win in Factorio, the final goal is to launch a rocket into space. The research is the easy part. We built a silo and set up our launch site. In order to build the rocket, we need 100 rocket parts, but each rocket part is extremely expensive. To account, I increased our production pretty much everywhere. Copper, steel, plastic, oil. Our expansion had essentially reached its limit for the resources we had, which is exactly why we need more, and the largest deposits were right where most of the biter nests were. Luckily for us, tank production had been working in earnest for about 10 hours. I also AFK'd for a while to wait for the rocket to build. Then I remembered, I'm dumb, because I totally botched setting everything up so the rocket was hardly building. I also realized my labs had been messed up for the past 23 hours. The science packs were just being tossed between the labs and being used at 50% speed for, again, 23 hours. Good thing we'd figured it out now, after I'd researched everything. With all the expansion, our factory looked like anaphylactic shock. It was getting more difficult to traverse with everything in the way. To solve this, I researched a new invention, the Spidertron, which costs raw fish to build. Apparently, you can walk over to the coastline and right-click these dark spots to collect fish, or you can ruin the aquatic ecosystem with an army of drones. Your choice. You can also eat fish for health, and given our collectivist roots, it was no surprise that this was the first time we'd had food in 206 days. With the Spidertron now assembled, I gave it a go. I was kind of disappointed. I thought it would be at least a little faster, but if violence has taught me anything, it's that there's a solution to every problem. After an hour of hard work and AFK farming, we stacked about 8 nuclear reactors into the Spidertron, among other things. But oh no, silly me, I left it on the other side of the map. Good thing I have this remote, because the remote allows us to press it, and then what's that noise? By increasing the number of legs from 8 to about 38, we could now traverse the whole factory way too fast. The Spiderbot also comes with 4 rocket launchers, so I tested the weapons a little. So now with our Spiderbot completed, uranium production through the roof, and a minor army of 300 fully armed tanks, it was finally time to expand. Over the past while, my vehicle deposits had accrued just a tiny amount of supplies. I placed all the vehicles we'd produce and readied our tanks for planetary annihilation and CPU melting, because the Red Army was causing some frame rate issues. With our glitchy gaggle, we ran into one of the outer hives. It did not fare well, and as we approached the main group of biter nests, it was only fitting that we'd attack the Soviet way. Many lives were lost, but we'd gained something far greater than those. There were some survivors, actually. Were survivors. Now, before someone on this planet figures out what a war crime is, let's just leave. Well, if you're at the end, I can't force you to subscribe, but if you don't,
I know where you live.